We are welcoming some new foes to the Truck Stop Conference. Let's introduce you to the one that keeps stealing all of our basketball players. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello there, and welcome to another episode of Locked On Baylor, brought to you by Gametime. I am your host, Cam Stewart of ESPN Central Texas and the Cam Show on Rogue Media Sports Network. Thank you guys for joining me and making it your first listen today and every day. We're going to go over the newest commit to Baylor football, and this is one that might actually get you pretty excited, I would say. Not just because of his skill set, but also what it means for the greater good of Baylor football. And then we're going to introduce you to one of the new Big 12 teams, those Utah Utes, the ones who called us the Truck Stop Conference, the one that keeps taking our basketball players. We're going to do a crossover with JT Wistrcill of Locked On Utes. Great guy, and we're going to go over how that rivalry could develop. But first things first, it was not an out of nowhere commitment for Baylor football. Chase Collier from the Bowl School in Jacksonville committing on Monday. It is, right in the middle of our visit season here. We're going to have official visits and camps and all of this coming up. So you're going to see some Baylor football commits over the next couple of weeks, and we will, of course, be monitoring those. But this one is, I say, an exciting one. Chase Collier, the wide receiver from Jacksonville, as I mentioned, the Bowl School, which is the alma mater of Mac Jones and maybe more importantly, Chipper Jones. So get some good athletic players coming out of there. High 3-star guy as a receiver, 6'1", 167. And honestly, if you look at the tape, you're like, really? 167? He looks bigger than that. He looks bigger than what he's listed. He commits to Baylor over schools like Arkansas and Appalachian State. He took a visit to Kansas and Virginia, Michigan State. Baylor gets his signature. He's going into his senior season. And the jump that he made from sophomore to junior was pretty incredible. As a sophomore, just a small part of their offense, caught less than 20 passes, 215 yards, 1 touchdown. This past year, for a program that, from what I could tell, didn't pass a whole lot. He finished with 32 catches, but for 571 yards and 6 touchdowns. So already, we're talking about steps up. And I can already hear a lot of you saying, those stats don't jump off the page to me. Why are you saying this is going to be so exciting? Here's why. Here's why it's going to be exciting. This kid has all world speed. Okay. He had, and this is from 247, 5 sub-11 second efforts in the 100-meter dash. Okay. Now, if you're not a big track fan, I get it. That is all world type stuff. State champions run somewhere between 10 and 11 seconds. He did that 5 times in the 100-meter dash. Top marks was 10, 7, 8. That is state championship stuff. And sub 22 in the 200, and anything under about 60 is pretty good. In the 400, he ran a sub 52 seconds. Again, elite numbers all across the board. So what that tells me is he is a burner. Not just for 100 meters, but for 200 and 400 and potentially the length of a football field here. This kid can burn out there. And you look at the highlight tape, and that's what it screams. He is winning 50-50 balls, but he is also beating a lot of guys down the end of the field. And so, to me, that sounds like a recruit that we've heard of before at Baylor. And it's not just one particular player, okay? Because what it sounds like to me is a lot of the wide receiver targets they were bringing in the early 2010s. Which led to some pretty great success at Baylor. And now, with Jake Spavital at the helm of the offense, we're running a similar offense to that. So all these things, these moves, in terms of the coaching staff and the players they're bringing in the portal and the ones that are getting recruited, I know it's not a huge deal for some of you guys listening because you're like, it's the transfer portal era now and it's NIL, so these kids commit, but it's not a real commitment, this, that, and the other. And I get that. I do. But what these moves have shown me in the offseason is that they are not just saying, hey, we're going to have a more exciting offense this year. They're saying, look at Look at the offensive line coach we brought in. Look at the receivers we brought in. Look at the receivers that we're looking at through the portal. Look at the prospects that are now interested in us because of this. Chase Collier is another example of that we're going to be bringing in the prototype that worked over a decade ago, to the tune of the best sustained run of success in Baylor football history. We want to bring in that player again because that can still work. And I believe that it can still work. And so it's not a fluke, the moves that they've made in the offseason in terms of solidifying that fun style of offense. They're not just saying it's going to be a new offense. They're saying, look, you don't believe me? Believe me now. It is going to be that kind of offense. And obviously that will, I think that will look extremely intriguing when it comes to the quarterback position over the next couple of years, because as we've said on the show before, whether it's going to be the traditional getting a guy straight out of high school and developing him, or looking at guys in the transfer portal, that is a big difference between the quarterbacks that they've looked at since, let's say, Charlie Brewer, versus what it would be to get another Seth Russell, Bryce Petty, Nick Florence, Zach Smith, Robert Griffin III. Like that's a big, big jump. And it's a different kind of quarterback, good, bad, or otherwise. At receiver, you're getting the guys that can burn. And Chase Collier can do that, man. He can really rip through a defense with that speed. That's not something that you lose at the next level. The guys going against you get faster, sure. A, he's playing a high level of high school football in Florida anyway. But B, you can't teach the speed. And to see this kind of speed come to the Bears is so refreshing, because outside of Monterey Baldwin, who is a top line speedster, that's not something they have had at that position the last couple of years, because they didn't need to. It wasn't complementary to their style of offense. Now they're starting to bring those guys in, and you and me and many others are starting to get excited again somewhere down the line with this kind of offense that Jake Spavital is building at Baylor. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Now, y'all, I do want to say I almost kept JT's in here, his ad read, because he talked about me being a big Mavericks fan. And those of you who know me and follow the show know that that is not true, but I am looking for NBA Finals tickets. And the only way to do that is through Gametime, okay? Because what you see is what you get. You got the all-in pricing as soon as you're looking. It's great for last-minute deals. So let's just say if a team goes up 3-0 and Game 4 is on a Friday, and someone like me can get up to Dallas and try to get last-minute tickets, I'm only going to look at Gametime, okay? They've got flash deals. They've got zone deals. Oh, by the way, I don't think that 3-0 is going to happen. I think it's going to be 2-1. And you can see the view from your seats before you ever hit purchase. They've also got the lowest price guarantee, or Gametime is going to credit you 110% of the difference. Your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. So take the guesswork out of buying NBA Finals tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE, for $20 off your first purchase. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed.
All right, Cam, let's focus our attention to 2024. Yes. Utah, as we said, very forgettable game in 2023. These rosters will look different. Utah has some returners, like the defense in particular. And, Utah's run defense did not play great in the first half of that game. And then they really locked in the second half. And that's where we saw Baylor struggle to move the ball for a lot of it. Although they got that big pass, and then there was some penalties, and there was that ball, should it have been DPI so it was a crazy finish in that game. And now fast forward to this year, and I'm sure some Baylor fans will get mad at me for saying this, but Cam, it's really hard to win at Utah. The truth of the matter is, and I will say, you guys have something in common with the last team that was able to do it. Both of you guys have green colors, but Bo Nix was pretty good, and they were a college football playoff team. That's the only team since 2018 that has come in and won in Rice-Eccles Stadium. Do you see a path where Baylor, in their second game of the season, with a lot of newness going on there, can getting to Rice-Eccles Stadium get a dub?
Yes.
I like it.
Put it out there. Sure. Maybe because week 1's against Tarleton State, which is not a state. Okay. So maybe Baylor just runs it 100 times in the game and there's just nothing on tape and they unleash this offense on the poor Utah Utes. That could happen, I don't know. Yeah. They are 0-1 in their last 1 trips to Utah, down the road about an hour to Provo. They did lose that game in double overtime. It was a classic. So yeah, I mean, there's a chance because it's early in the season. And I think when I came on with you last year, I said there was probably no chance, and it ended up being a close enough game. So you never know. But I am not pandering to a fan base here. I've said it on the program before. I do have the Utes as my pick to win the conference. So I'm not going to sit here and say like, oh yeah, Baylor's going to blow them out. There's a chance because it's early in the season. And maybe they don't know any better and there's not a lot on tape on the Bears. But I think Utah is going to have a formidable team, I would say.
Well, you have the guy who hosts Locked On Utes on your show, so let me also talk to those Baylor fans who think you're a little crazy for thinking that think you're a little crazy for thinking Utah's going to win right away. This is a Kyle Whittingham and a Utah team that has been incredibly consistent. Yes, they were 8-4 last year. If I went through the number of injuries they had and the fact that their only losses, like the fact that they were able to find a way to win in Waco, is such a credit and testament to this team's overall strength. This is a top 5 run defense in college football last year. They lost 1 defensive end. Yes, Jonah Ellis was really good, but his strength as a pass rusher in games he missed, the run defense really didn't fall off there. Cam Rising is the only quarterback in college football that has won a Power 4, unfortunately now it's Power 4, not Power 5, conference championship twice in his career and is coming back. And I know he's coming off the injury, but he looked good in the spring game, and I'd much rather be relying on Cam to get back to where he was than a lot of other quarterbacks. So it's like, well, they haven't proven they could get there yet, but they showed potential. Like Cam's a pretty sure thing. You add a 1,000-yard receiver in Dorian Singer, a guy who did it at Arizona, didn't go his way at USC, but they had a lot of mouths to feed, and not a lot of things went USC's way, right? You got Brant Keith, who's one of the best returning tight ends in college football. If you look at his overall production, 2 separate seasons with over 600 yards under his belt. And there's a reason I was talking about Baylor and Utah, the similarities. This Utah offensive line also does a really good physical job of running the ball. This is a Utah team that has 12 players that are coming back that were played a key role on one or both of those conference championship teams. So it's a stacked Utah squad, and that's where it's going to be very hard for Baylor to come in with a lot of new look pieces early on and beat them in Rice-Eccles Stadium, because once again, Utah has lost at home. The altitude is a huge factor. This is another reason Utah's probably the favorite. Altitude is a huge factor. It gets loud. I'm not saying it's one of the most packed capacity stadiums. Kirk Herbstreit said it the first game last year. It's one of the loudest stadiums you're in because of the way they trap the sound in there. And the altitude's a real thing. It wears guys down, and you can't go against that home record. 1 loss since 2018 at home, and their starting quarterback didn't even play in the game. And I will be fair to Oregon. I think they still probably would have beaten Utah last year, but it's tough to beat this Utah squad. And it also sounds like with teams in the position that Baylor is, this is the type of game they'd probably rather have at the end of the season when you're clicking more with some of those new pieces that are kind of in. So that's where I feel like it'll be tough for the Bears, but I've also thought it might be challenging for Utah once everything started to go kind of crazy with the injuries. And hey, they found a win down in Waco, so you never know how things are going to play out in the fall, right?
That's true. And I do want to ask you kind of a general question here, JT, about, going into the Big 12. We're doing this whole series, so clearly you're committed to learning this new conference. Mm-hmm. I believe, I might be wrong on this, as someone who's chronically online, I believe it was someone from the Utah fan base who coined the truck stop conference, which the Big 12 has since embraced. I love being the truck stop conference. And you, JT, in particular, have seen what a real truck stop conference looks like. I don't know, something like the Big Sky. We love that kind of conference. Okay. So, Utah comes in. This is a much more stable conference than it was a couple years ago. You're bringing some of your buddies with you from the Pac-12. What is the overall, because I only heard about it from a year ago. So what is the overall feeling in the fan base of, all right, we can do it. Pac-12's done. We can't change that. We're glad to be out of the WAC still. Like, let's embrace this Big 12 thing. Is that what it's like?
It absolutely feels that way. There is always going to be a small amount of fans who are vocal and negative. Cam, you and I deal with those every single day because we host daily talk show hosts. But the reality of the situation is Yes, if all things in a perfect world, I was a traditionalist. I liked the Pac-12. It was fun being a part of that conference, but that's not a thing anymore. And the truth is Utah is very lucky to be in the Big 12 because, like you said, there are a lot of programs in this conference that have that Power 4 stability, that are a strong brand and name, especially compared to what obviously Oregon State and Washington State are going through right now. So I think Utah is really excited about the opportunity this fall. I mean, this is a team that is pretty all in this year. Kyle Whittingham has openly talked about retirement. Could this be his last year? This, barring something insane, will be Cam Rising's last year of football. There's a lot of guys that have been around when this team won their first conference championship in 21. So I expect this to be the last season we see a lot of those guys. There could be, almost every spot from a guy that won a conference championship with this team back in 22. This should be their last run with the team before they end up going somewhere else. So there's a lot of newness and a lot of things expected, but it's an opportunity to form new rivalries. And this is the new era of college football. And I'm really excited for the opportunity that's ahead of Utah in the Big 12 because I think they can be really good and successful. And they're going to be challenged too, because there are teams, whether it is a Baylor, hopefully Dave Aranda gets it turned around this year. I like him. I think he's a good coach. It didn't go his way last year though. So we'll see if that happens. I think they're obviously Colorado. I know there's a lot of frustration with some of the things with Dion, but Shedeur Sanders is incredibly talented. And I do think, and they obviously took a step in the right direction. Like there's a lot of programs in the Big 12 that feels like they're Kansas State, Kansas, obviously, right? Like these programs that are building step in the right way and building momentum. I think this is a great opportunity in the Big 12 for Utah to stay relevant, to play some really good competition too. And I can't wait to see how it all goes down this fall. And as sad as I am to see the Pac-12 officially come undone recently as they played their final game, I'm excited about the new potential and the history that's going to form in these new rivalries.
Yeah, like I think this is not a bad thing. Like I think Utah slots in just fine with this group. Obviously Baylor's not the greatest comp because Baylor's a smaller private school. But I mean, you look at some of these, the Kansas States, the teams that are also coming in, like the Arizonas and the Colorados, a West Virginia, even like that feels like this is where these teams, I know geographically, maybe not so, but in terms of the school profiles and the program profiles, I think Utah slots in just fine. And plus it seems like we're going to be making a trip out there every year, whether it's to SLC or down the road to south a little bit.
You're doing a great job. Not beautiful Utah. I didn't even say before, like you couldn't say their name, but you're doing a good job. You're not making the Utah fans mad.
Look, I'm trying to honor this. I am. I try to honor these rivalries. We won't talk about that school up in Fort Worth. Nothing about 2009. Nothing there either. Yep. So perfect. We're on the same.
I didn't even think about it. I haven't mentioned them either. So I guess we're both. Hey, looks like maybe Utah and Baylor will be those two schools that like give that nod of respect to each other every time they play. Maybe we should be just a tip. Exactly. Because we're not going to be that. There's a couple of Big 12 schools I already know we're not going to be that with. That is that is for sure. But Cam, it is interesting because Utah is in a great spot when it comes to competing in football this fall. I cannot say the same thing about the men's basketball team because they are not in a great position and they are entering arguably the toughest college basketball conference in the country. But thankfully, they're trying to take from a very successful program like Baylor because they've added two of their guys. Yes, Caleb Lohner came to Utah to play football. I believe he came to Utah to get his toes wet in terms of learning the position. This is one of the best tight end rooms in college. You have three tight ends who had over 100, who have had a season last year, just the last full time they were healthy, who have over 180 yards. You got one with 180, one over 200, and then Brant Keithy, where I talked about. Like, I just don't see how Lohner is going to play. So I think he'll amazingly be a basketball guy. And Miro Little is a guy with loads of potential. I can't imagine Baylor shed a tear to see either of those guys go with the limited production that they got, especially from the points per game column. But try to give us Utah fans a little bit of hope about what these additions can be. Little in particular is probably going to be their starting point guard right now. And I'm a little nervous about that.
Yeah, well, I'm like totally transparent here. There's not a lot of bad I can say about either one of them. Caleb Lohner, I think looking back, we probably had a bit too high of expectations for him when he came in from that other school in Utah.
Well, have you really quick, all you Baylor fans, do you know where he was originally committed to go?
Would that Utah. Be the U of U? Are you?
when I was a sophomore on campus, I passed him on his visit. I thought we had him, and sure enough, he burned us and went to BYU and became public enemy number one. And now he's made his way all the way back to be a tight end. Let's just say it's been a crazy cycle with Loner.
What a ride, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely. What a ride. So yeah, he comes in and we're thinking, not like a shooter or anything, but a good rebounder, slasher, cutter. And he just didn't click that first year, which was 2 years ago, 22, 23. And he became comical of like, he played a possession without his shoe on. Like he would dribble it off his foot all the time. Like he would butcher wide open rebounds. And I think there was some animosity there. And then this past year, I think he fit into his role a lot better. Like was guarding the whole front court pretty well. He played physical. He still took a few too many threes, which was like 4 or 5 on the whole season, too many. And he just became I think a good energy role player off the bench. And then the Big 12 tournament comes around, JT. So watch out for this next March, because his game just like goes to another level when he gets to Kansas City for some reason. I don't know what it is. But he put up like a double in the Big 12 tournament last year. It was incredible. So in terms of the basketball portion of things, I don't see him being like an impact starter, but a guy who can fit a good role off the bench and give you some real energy. Because I'm serious, he did give them a lot of that this year. Now Miro is a guy I really like. I really liked him out of high school. And we knew it was going to be a little bit. He was not going to be a guy who was going to come in and be the starting point guard right away. This past year as a freshman. I think he's a real crafty player, definitely fits into like that European stereotype of a point guard, pass first, crafty. And I just think like 2 years from now, so maybe not this upcoming year, but the next year, I think he's going to be a real impact player. Like I'm telling you, I just think he grew so much in limited time here in Waco. When Langston Love got hurt, his role became a lot bigger on the team as kind of a backup point guard there, which Baylor has not had a lot of. And he came in and was a good defensive guy at first. He was making all the hustle plays. And then you started to see some flashes of, some bounce to him, some good passes. Like I just see him. I would watch him in warmups too, which I know is nothing. He's shooting against air, but I'm like, man, his shot's just looking better. Like he's developing a shot there. So I wouldn't be surprised if he is a creator and a decent 3-point shooter within the next year or two. And I thought that defense, which this defense of this last year was not the defense of like 2 or 3 years ago for Baylor when they had some of the best defenses in the country, but he's still impressed on that end. So you look at the numbers and there's not much you can take there, right? He didn't play a lot, about a point a game or whatever it was, a point and an assist a game. But I think Baylor fans saw enough flashes that you were like, man, I don't expect him to be an all Big 12 guy next year, but fully expect him to develop into a pretty good starter, I think, by his junior year. So I am excited about the Miro Little thing. I wish we didn't have to see him go, but it is a logjam at guard for Baylor this year and next year. So wasn't ultimately too surprised to see that. And look, I'll say this about basketball in general. Follow the UCF model, whatever they did, because they came into the conference this year and everybody wrote them off. They were like, this is not a basketball school anyway, even in the AAC. Like they're going to be the doormat of this conference. And look, they didn't come close to making the tournament or anything, but they were as impressive as I've seen that program in the last 4 or 5 years since they had Taco Fall and they made the tournament. Like they gave some good runs. They beat Kansas at home. They beat UT on the road. They had another big win in there somewhere. Like they held their own. And even those games they weren't winning, they were hanging tight. They hung tight with Baylor. The Baylor needed a second half comeback to beat them in Orlando. So after seeing that, I can't just say, Utah, come on, forget about them. Like maybe there's something. I don't know.
And I can see with the players that Utah has a world where they become that. It's not likely,
Yeah.
but there's a chance. That's all I can ask for, right? I just need hope. And you've given me a little of that with the little pitch on Miro, as well as just, Caleb is going to get a little stronger and be the enforcer. So I appreciate, I think all of us Utah fans appreciate you giving us some optimism about those recent ads here.
Look, I try. And look, UCF, they were plucky, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's better than being a doormat.
Yep.
That's better than being embarrassed. Okay. I think there is a chance I think their level just raised up. They saw Big 12 on the court and they were like, okay, we're going to be serious now. So Utes might be doing the same thing.
I think, hey, that's the hope. That is the hope. Fingers crossed about that. What's nice though, Cam, is we got a football season before I got to worry about basketball. So
fine. Okay.
I am excited to see this Utah football team. And I am very intrigued by Utah basketball, just like I'm excited for all of the new rivalries that Baylor and Utah are going to start to build this season, as well as all the other new Big 12 showdowns. It's going to be a lot of fun, Cam, just like I'm excited to do more of these with you. Thanks for stopping by today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me. Anything I can let you know about the roadmap of the Big 12, you just let me know.
I will. And I just want to ask about that team in Fort Worth. I know.
Fine. We'll get there.
Yeah. Oh, that is going to do it for us today. Thank you guys so much for listening to Locked On Utes and Locked On Baylor. And we'll be back with you very soon for more content.